Hello, hello. How are you? How was your Wednesday? So today, um, no gags, no mucking about for me. It is, of course, Armistice Day, um, and it seems a little bit inappropriate. So I thought we'd have a sort of quick chat about what Armistice Day is all about. Um, Armistice Armistice Day originated at the end of World War I, or the Great War as it's known, which was 1914 to 1918. World War I started when the Austrian heir to the throne, and his wife actually, Archduke Ferdinand, was assassinated by um, a Bosnian Serb actually, in Sarajevo, and so after that, the Serbs, the Russians, the Serbs, and the Germans, and the Hungarians, and what was formerly the Ottoman Empire, which is a dynasty that goes back centuries and centuries, um, faced off against what became known as the Allies, which was Russia, Great Britain, France, Belgium. Ultimately, it was Italy, although Italy sided with the Germans in the first instance, and World War I began. And at that point, the Americans weren't involved. The Americans didn't get involved until 1917. Um, so they stayed neutral for the bulk of the war. But it wasn't until I'm not sure on the date, but I think it was sometime in 1916, a British cruise liner called the Lusitania was sunk by a German U-boat, and so the Americans were concerned about this, but didn't get involved. But then there was a telegram sent um, later on suggesting that um, the alliance of the Germans, etc., would side with Mexico if um, there was any trouble in South America, or particularly in the likes of Arizona and what have you in the States. So I waffled a bit there, but essentially what happened was that the Americans then, in 1917, came into the war. Um, Prior to that, in 1916, we'd have had something called, what that you'll know or have heard of, called the Battle of the Somme. Now, the Battle of the Somme was the bloodiest battle that there's been in pretty much any well, certainly in Great British history in warfare. On the first day alone, um, there were 19,000 British troops killed. Um, it lasted about 5 months, I think, the Battle of the Somme, and ultimately, um, on all sides, there was 1 million soldiers killed. It was just absolute carnage, and in fact, on the two world wars um, in total, sorry, from the two sides in total, including civilians, the war cost something in the region of 16 million lives. Um, it was horrendous. So anyway, in 1918, um, the Armistice was signed, which is why it's called Armistice Day. Essentially, the Germans and the Hungarians and Prussians, and etc., capitulated, and the armistice was signed. And it was actually signed near a place called Compiègne, I think it's pronounced, and they actually signed it in a railway carriage just outside of Compiègne, and it was signed at about 5 o'clock in the morning, and fighting was supposed to cease by 11. All fighting. It didn't. It probably took time for the news to filter through. Obviously, they didn't have the internet in those days, or mobile phones, and the fighting actually ended sometime around about midnight. But because the fighting was due to finish at 11, we now recognise that as Armistice Day. So it's the 11th hour of the 11th month. And that's why we have Armistice Day, and that's why we have Remembrance Day on the 11th of November. So that's your little history lesson. There's a few bits I've probably omitted there, and there's a few bits that I've forgotten about. The Americans, as I say, joined the war in 1917. In total, they lost about 50,000 troops, which is pretty horrendous. But when you consider the losses on both sides, it is unbelievable, really. I mean, it just costs so many lives. So in theory, when you see Remembrance service at Royal Albert Hall, which is held every year, this year obviously there were very few people there, but when the poppies come down at the end, each poppy is there to recognise every life that was lost during the battle, and hence why the British Legion sell poppies, and they still support soldiers and families who are injured and killed in battle, even up to this day, because of course there have been more modern day conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq, so on and so forth. So there are still many veterans who need help. There are still many families who need help. So that's why the British Legion are involved. There are very few people left from World War One. You'll have heard of the Chelsea pensioners, who normally go to the parades in London, the parade at the Cenotaph, but their numbers dwindle obviously every year because it was over 100 years ago, so there are few left. So that was World War One, and that's why we have Armistice Day, and that's all from me. So be safe.